Yes.
This program is kind of an offshoot of a project we've been working on for the past year and a half. Sorry.
Is your volume?
Learning about native pollination systems, and I'm thrilled that we have a member of the, actually two members, three members of the Native Pollinator Task Force with us this evening. Sam Corbin from the, what are you? What's your official title?
I am the conservation coordinator for the Sudbury Valley Trustees.
So,
Yay.
Sudbury Valley Trustees.
yeah, so Sam is going to talk about what they have been working on, and then I'm going to give a little overview of our plans here in Bedford, what we've been doing. So, Sam.
Thank you. All right. Oh, I just got shocked. Thank you all so much for joining. I am Samantha Corbin. I am the conservation coordinator for the Sudbury Valley Trustees, but I am also a member of the Native Pollinator Task Force. Luckily, I have two of my colleagues here with me today. So it's our first hybrid meeting. So this is very exciting for a lot of different reasons. So we're the Sudbury Valley Trustees. They are a nonprofit organization that protects open space, natural habitat, and farmlands for both people and wildlife in the 36 communities surrounding the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord River watershed. The Sudbury Valley Trustees also coordinate the activities of the Metro West Conservation Alliance, or the MCA, and they also consist of municipalities, other nonprofits, and individuals that have just collaborated together to form this group in order to assist conservation efforts throughout the same watershed. SVT has been helping the Native Pollinator Task Force since 2018, and they have been providing staff and guidance through really a lot of the growth of this initiative. I started in September, so I'm very new to the initiative and I'm happy to be a part of it. SVT is also a member-supported organization. If you're not already a member, I hope that you consider it, and if you join, you're also supporting the help in your local community. So the Native Pollinator Task Force is a steering committee that mission is to conserve native pollination systems by providing habitat requirements and reducing threats for at-risk pollinators in the 36 communities of the Metro West Conservation Alliance. Our work has been heavily influenced by the research of Dr. Jagir, who has been studying pollination systems right here in the watershed. We are focused on two species of at-risk bumblebees, the golden northern bumblebee and the half-black bumblebee. By targeting these at-risk species, we also help other pollinator species, plants, and entire ecosystems as a result. The Native Pollinator Task Force has created the Bumblebee Project. They are heavily supported by many different organizations, not only in the MCA, but in a lot of the communities in, again, the watershed. A little bit more about Dr. Jagir, who, as I mentioned before, has really influenced and motivated us to work on this initiative. He is a professor of biology at UMass Dartmouth and the director of Beecology, which is a citizen science app that is used to identify foraging behaviors of bumblebees. He's been researching pollination systems and functional diversity in our watershed too, and focuses on native bumblebees. So what does it mean to be at risk, and why are we specifically focused on these bees? Sorry, I'm just going to pull up the chat for a second. The slides are progressing on my end as I'm sharing my screen, so I apologize for any of that. You see it, right?
Well, yeah, I see it now.
Okay. All right, well, now it changed. All right, cool. So what does it mean to be an at-risk pollinator? It means that the population of these species have been declining either recently or over time. They are not a state or federally listed species. We are just aware of their decline in general. So now that we know this, we want to help. Honeybees are not native bees, so we're focusing on native bumblebee species. Honeybees are actually imported from Europe and are classified as livestock because they do not support our native plants or pollination systems. They only pollinate agricultural crops. Pollination systems are incredibly important because they are the building blocks of biodiversity. Pollination of native plants produces food, shelter, and nesting opportunities for lots of wildlife. In addition to all of those fundamental things, they also provide carbon cycling and sequestration. They filter and purify our water and air, and they assist in soil erosion control. Unfortunately, the degradation of some population systems has been occurring over time. If we look at this graph by Dr. Jagir, we're actually looking at the population levels of bumblebees in Massachusetts. The blue bars indicate population levels from before the year 2000. Yellow is indicating 2015 to 2019. If we take a look at this end of the graph, we're seeing that these species, including Bombus vagans, which is one of the at-risk pollinators that the Bumblebee Project is focusing on, are declining when you compare it to the data from 2000. However, we're seeing a totally different story on the other side of this graph. Bombus impatiens, IMP, has actually increased from 2015 to the year 2000. So not every species is affected the same way, which is something to keep in mind. We're also seeing this occur in butterflies throughout New England. This is a much more intense graph, but it does paint a similar picture. We're seeing that in the red arrow pointing down, there are a number of dots indicating different species of butterfly, and some are actually declining more than others. Whereas if you look to the right of the graph, everything above the green arrow is indicating how much a population has increased. Now, unfortunately, this is not, well, it's unfortunate that it's happening, but it's even more unfortunate that it's happening to plants as well. According to this article and many other studies, about 22% of our native plants are either to be extinct or considered rare or in decline. So pollination systems as a whole are affected just by different degrees. So why is this happening? And it's happening for a number of different reasons. Most significantly, it's happening due to habitat destruction. When you take away habitat, you're not only taking away a place for an organism to live, but for bees, you're taking away pollen and nectar resources as well. So it's incredibly devastating. Honeybees actually will outcompete native bees and spread pathogens that are really harmful to native bees. So that stinks us too. Pesticides and climate change are also contributing factors to pollination system decline and bee decline. Pollination systems take on many different forms. We have a lot of diversity of plants and insects, and they come with different interactions. Doug Talamay actually notes that about 90% of insects only utilize a certain species or family of plant. A really good example of this kind of interaction can be found when you look at bumblebee tongues. Their tongue lengths correspond to different shapes of flowers. The type of flower shape determines how the bee is able to access pollen and nectar. So bees and flowers have co-evolved together in order to ensure that bumblebees can get access to the pollen and to the nectar that they need. And it also ensures that the species and family of plant will be pollinated as well. So these are the two bees that we are really focused on. We have the half-black bumblebee, or Bombus vagans, and it can be identified by the black dot on the thorax and the half black solid marking on the lower part of the abdomen. And we have the golden northern bumblebee, which has a black band on its thorax and a black tip at the end of its abdomen. Both of these species are actually long-tongued bumblebee species. And this means that they rely on deep flowers like your milkweeds and your lobelia. So it's really important that when we're creating habitat for these specific bees, that we are planting the plants that they need to survive. These plants can be found on Dr. Jagir's recommended plant list. He updates and has developed this plant list over time, and it highlights which species of plant can help certain species of bumblebees, butterflies, and other native bees. What's really cool about this list is it also identifies the time of year the plant will bloom and provide pollen and nectar sources for these bumblebees. I also want to note on the left, you can see that some of these plant names are highlighted in gray. This means that they are Massachusetts state listed rare plants by the National Heritage. I point this out because there are legal protections placed on these plants. It is illegal to collect rare plants or their seeds from naturally occurring wild populations. It is not illegal to buy them at nurseries. They're very common plants, so the purchasing of them is legal. You just can't go out and collect native and established populations of them without a special permit. It's also important to keep in mind when you're buying plants for habitat to make sure you're selecting straight species and not cultivars. Now, straight species are the naturally occurring plants found in the environment without any alterations. Cultivars have been bred in order to exaggerate a certain color or a part of the plant. It can be petal shape, petal arrangement, things like that. You can often tell the difference because there's an additional English name in quotations like fiery red or purple delight, often named after the feature they're trying to exaggerate. When these plants are bred, it alters the chemical makeup of the pollen and the nectar. So unfortunately, we know that this may not be the kind of pollen and nectar that bumblebees need in order to survive. So we encourage the use of straight species because we know those help our bees. It's also important to provide overwintering habitat. So not only do we need to give them plants with pollen and nectar, but having stems left over in the winter and leaving the leaves on the ground and fallen logs are all things that provide habitat over the winter. So what else can you do to help insects? Well, reducing your lawn and reducing or eliminating the use of pesticides is really helpful. And of course, planting native plants. It also is really important to either leave the leaves in the fall, delay your spring cleanup, or both. Not altering the habitat that bees and other pollinating insects need to survive the winter is incredibly important. So holding out for as long as you can before you do any cleanup is something that the bees will be really grateful for. So you and your neighbors can make a huge difference. If you join with your local communities to plant a pollinator preservation garden, like the Bedford Rotary Club, or taking the time and trying to establish habitat in your yard. Small and large efforts are incredibly impactful, so I encourage you to do what you can if you would like. The Bumblebee Project is working on a couple of different things to further promote the initiative, but also make our work really accessible. We partnered with the Sudbury Valley trustees to organize a plant sale, which includes plants from Dr. Jagir's recommended plant list, and is a way to just get the plants into the hands of people who want to plant them. Our Bumblebee Project website has actually just been completely redone. So I'm happy to share that that is now live with lots of really great resources and will continue to be updated. with projects like the map that we're hoping to make, which will identify pollinator plantings. This will span from a project as large as a pollinator preservation garden, or as small as a pot in your yard, or just a corner of a place that you have that you're looking to fill. If anyone has any questions or would like to contact me directly, you can reach me at the email you see on the screen, but we will also have time for a chat after. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to Paula's presentation.
I'm going to share what we have been doing in Bedford. So how do I advance there? Trying to advance the screen. Where's your, yeah.
For some reason, I'm just gonna close out all of these because it's also not projecting. There you go.
All right. So the Rotary Club of Bedford has taken on the environment as a new area of focus because it's an area of focus for Rotary International. So we were wondering what we could do. So we learned about initiatives that Rotary had established, and one was Operation Pollination. And the goals of that are to increase and improve pollinator habitat and to educate the public about the importance of pollination systems. And a perfect way of accomplishing both those goals would be to have a publicly accessible garden, which we decided to try to implement. And so we had to find a location in town that was central, visible, and accessible. And we came up with Page Fields as being a pretty good location. So we approached the town manager, who spoke to the DPW, and we walked actually the entirety of Page Field, and the DPW manager pointed out a specific area, which we're looking at right now, and offered us a 400 square foot patch of that. So to give you some frame of reference, the baseball fields are at the far end of that. And if you could imagine the Minuteman statue, that's kind of behind that, it's, I guess, to the left of this a little bit. And those steps there on the right-hand side go to the narrow gauge trail. So there's actually steps down from that paved rail trail down to this. And there's a granite marker that's right in the middle that got knocked over during mowing sometime. But this was before we did anything. But before we could do anything at all, we had to go to the Conservation Commission and submit a, Wetlands Protection Act request for a determination of accessibility. I should get a prize for remembering all that. and also, yeah, a prize for filling out that form, because it was really long. And we basically had to come up with our entire plan of how we were going to develop the area and what we were going to do with it. And there's actually a pond beyond that stuff that's sticking up there. Well, it's called Page Pond, but there wasn't really any water anytime we've been there. So, but it's kind of wetlands. I guess it was called wetlands replication because they took wetlands from somewhere else. So they decided to make this into wetlands here. So it's kind of wet in general. So that's what we're working with. It's pretty open and sunny most of the time, but it is wet. And that kind of informed our decisions about plants, etc. But that's the area. So then you'll see our next step, which features many people here. Our first step was to prepare the bed, and we used a smothering approach, which is we got a whole pile of cardboard Luckily, my neighbor was renovating their kitchen and bathroom, so I was able to access a ludicrous amount of cardboard to cover the 10 by 40 feet area there. And the DPW mowed the grass down to as low as they could. So it was pretty much dirt that we were working with. They covered it with cardboard, and then we covered it with wood chips. And I'm very thankful to Freddie Gillespie of Southborough for, helping me along the way, giving me instructions on what to do. And she was the former chair of the task force, the Native Pollinator Task Force. So this was our first step, and kind of pretty much the only thing we've done right now, because we did that last September, October, and we need to leave that for almost a year, I think, in order for it to really kill off all the, you should know, to make sure that nothing grows underneath, that kills off all the weeds. Hopefully nothing is going to, it's like mulching the whole thing. Is that a good enough answer, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay. Phew, tough crowd. All right, so then our next step is selecting plants, which we had to do as part of our application process. And we used all the things that Sam talked about. We used Dr. Jagir's list. We're absolutely focusing on the plants that to protect the pollinators that he had targeted. So can I move that? It's in the way. So we have, we picked 2 nectar plants in bloom each month from March to October. So that's 16 different plants. We to make sure that one species is in bloom at all time. And then that's because bees can't survive without nectar. And 1 pollen plant in bloom. So that's where you get your 24 species. And plants will be planted in kind of a bundle together of 3 square feet. I'm sure Sam's going to be able to explain more about why that is, but I was just told you have to do that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then we added in, because we have the space, we added in plants for butterflies at risk and other bees. And all of these were pulled from Dr. Jagir's list. So that's absolutely the only ones that I used. And we can share all that information. And I'll share these slides too, if anybody wants them after the fact. I can send them out to everybody. But this is our planting plan. I'm really proud of how pretty it looks. Doesn't it look pretty? So cute. It's great. So I'm totally stole the idea of the different colors for all the different plants from the landscape. What is it? The
Lincoln Action Plan.
The Lincoln Action Plan. Yeah, they have really fancy landscape designers know what they're doing. I am a total amateur, a just enthusiast of this idea. So I spend my time picking out from the list different plants that fulfilled these requirements. I made the assumption that it was wet or medium soil in full or part sun. So this diagram represents all that. I'm not going to read out all those plants because, it's a lot of words. Things that people will recognize, like pussy willow, there isn't one that we all know, right? And obviously we've got the what do you call it, one that everybody wants, milkweed. There we go. We've got milkweed, we've got all kinds of other ones, but I haven't seen a lot of these plants, but I have visited some pollinator gardens, mostly the ones in Southborough, and Freddie has grown a lot of these plants because I actually focused as many as I could on plants I knew that she had grown. So I figured somebody I know has grown them, so maybe I'll be able to do it then. I don't know. All right, and so in between the plants, this is another thing that it's not like regular gardening where you would use mulch. It's a different kind of focus. You'd leave bare soil between the plants for ground nesting bees, and to use things like this salt marsh hay, which is very pretty, I think, you know, around plants after they get to help them get established. And the good news about all these things is that because they're native plants, theoretically, once they're established, they won't need a lot of tending. I'm getting a lot of nodding from Giancarlo, so yay, that's good. Glad I made that assumption. So I'm saying this, but I'm not sure 100%. I have been promised that some seeds from Southborough's Open Space Preservation Commission to have a winter sow program here. I'm not sure how many seeds we'll be able to get, but we got some last year. And in the Rotary Club, we did a little winter sow project ourselves. Some of us were more successful than others. Not looking at anybody in particular.
Those are my jugs in the middle.
Yes. Christine did a very good job of taking pictures of her
They're
jugs.
dormant.
Yeah, yeah. And Debbie, who's out there somewhere, was very successful with her plants.
Not a little sabbatical.
So, yeah.
Deal.
And I actually grew one of those purple
Purple giant
hyssop. So,
Cool.
yeah. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with winter sow, but basically it's a process of using milk jugs. You cut them in half, you put organic soil and plant the seeds, tape them up, put them outside in the snow, and just let them sit. Because they go through, the native plants have evolved with New England weather patterns, and they can handle being outside in the lovely weather that we have here in the winter. And then come spring, you can open them up and leave them still outside until they come to there's a certain stage when they're ready for planting, but I won't go into that. It's like something number of leaves. I don't know. Anyway, there's documents about this. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But theoretically, we would end up with plants that we could use in the garden or anybody else's garden that would like to grow, you know, have native plants in there. And so this is a little video I took at Freddie's garden. So this is like, you could do this in your own garden if you wanted to, but we would love to have anybody help us when we will be doing planting, because I did buy the plants that I ordered the plants that Sam mentioned. So we will have some plants to plant this year. And I mentioned all the things that Sam talked about, you know, choosing the native plants. Oops, why is this?
I think the video just timed out.
Oh, okay. And you can plant native plants, choose straight species, not cultivars. And big thing I keep hearing, don't use plants with neonicotinoids. Nicotinoids. That was a hard one to say. And don't use pesticides. That was our whole